In the autumn of 1944, the world watched as the Allied armies, having swept through the battered fields of France and Belgium, now pressed against the very threshold of Germany itself. The air was thick with anticipation and uncertainty. Soldiers, weary from months of relentless combat, found themselves staring across a no-man's land at the imposing border of the Third Reich. Here, at this critical juncture, the city of Aachen loomed ahead, a city whose fate would shape the course of the war in Europe. Aachen was not merely a city, it was a symbol steeped in the echoes of centuries past. As the ancient capital of Charlemagne, Aachen had once been the heart of a vast empire, a place where emperors were crowned and destinies forged. Its cathedral, a masterpiece of medieval architecture, stood as a silent witness to the rise and fall of kingdoms. For generations, the city had represented the unity and power of the Germanic world, its stones imbued with the pride and identity of a nation. But in the shadow of World War II, Aachen's significance was transformed. No longer just a relic of history, it became a linchpin in the German defensive network. The city's location was of paramount importance. It sat astride a web of railways and highways, the arteries through which the lifeblood of the German war effort flowed. Trains loaded with ammunition, tanks, and reinforcements rumbled through its stations, while convoys of trucks snaked along its roads, connecting the industrial Ruhr Valley to the embattled Western Front. Control of Aachen meant control of these vital arteries. For the Allies, capturing the city would sever German supply lines, isolate enemy units, and open a direct route into the heart of Germany's industrial might. For the Axis, holding Aachen was a matter of survival. Without it, the Western defences would unravel, and the Ruhr's factories would be exposed to Allied attack. Aachen was also a cornerstone of the Siegfried Line, or West Wall, a formidable chain of bunkers, pillboxes, and anti-tank obstacles stretching for hundreds of miles along Germany's western border. This defensive line, built with concrete and steel, was designed to slow or halt any Allied incursion. Its bunkers, manned by determined German soldiers, bristled with machine guns and artillery, while tank traps and minefields turned the countryside into a deadly maze. The city's capture would create a breach in this defensive wall, threatening the entire German position in the west. It would allow Allied forces to pour into the Ruhr Valley, the industrial heartland responsible for much of Germany's war production, coal, steel, and armaments that fueled the Nazi war machine. The stakes could not have been higher. The broader implications were profound. For the Allies, success at Aachen would mark the first penetration of Germany's pre-war borders, delivering a psychological blow to the enemy and signalling the beginning of the end for the Third Reich. It would also provide a staging ground for further offensives into the German interior, hastening the collapse of resistance. The soldiers who would fight for Aachen knew that their actions would echo far beyond the city's ruined streets. For the Axis, the defense of Aachen was a matter of both strategy and morale. The city's loss would expose the Ruhr and threaten the cohesion of the entire Western Front. Its fall would undermine the myth of the Siegfried Line's impregnability and erode confidence in the Nazi leadership's ability to defend the homeland. German commanders, aware of the city's symbolic and strategic value, prepared for a desperate stand. The battle for Aachen thus became a contest not only for territory but for the future direction of the war in Europe. The city's strategic position, its role as a transportation and communication hub, and its symbolic weight combined to make it a focal point of Allied and Axis planning. In the days leading up to the assault, both sides pored over maps, calculated artillery ranges, and prepared for the brutal urban combat that would soon engulf the city. The outcome would shape the tempo and trajectory of the Allied advance, determine the fate of Germany's industrial resources, and influence the morale of both sides. In the shadow of its ancient cathedral and behind the walls of its fortifications, Aachen stood as the key to the next phase of the war, a city whose capture or defense would echo far beyond its ruined streets. Officers and enlisted men alike understood that the coming battle would test their courage, discipline, and resolve to the utmost. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test the limits of strategy, endurance, and resolve, with the fate of nations hanging in the balance. As the first American patrols crept toward the outskirts of Aachen, the city's defenders braced for the onslaught. The struggle for Aachen was about to begin, not just as a battle for a city, but as a turning point in the struggle for Europe itself. The world would soon witness a clash of armies amid the shattered streets and ancient stones, where every block, every building, and every life would count. On the morning of October 10th, 1944, a thick blanket of grey clouds hung low over Aachen, casting a sombre pall over the city's battered rooftops and empty streets. The air was heavy with anticipation and the distant rumble of artillery, as if the city itself was holding its breath, awaiting its fate. In the early hours, American officers gathered around a makeshift table, maps of Aachen spread before them, their faces drawn and serious. The city, once a proud symbol of European heritage, now stood on the precipice, its ancient stones and winding alleys about to become the stage for a brutal contest of wills. The American command, acutely aware of the horrors that urban combat would unleash, weighed their options with grim resolve. They knew that every block, every building could become a fortress, every window a potential sniper's nest. The cost in lives, both their own and those of the city's defenders, would be staggering. Determined to avoid a bloodbath, the Americans drafted a final ultimatum: surrender the city within 24 hours or face the full might of Allied firepower. This was not a hollow threat, but a calculated attempt to spare both their men and the city from annihilation. The ultimatum was delivered under a flag of truce, American soldiers advancing cautiously through the outskirts, white cloth fluttering in the wind. On the German side, officers received the message in a dimly lit command post, the weight of responsibility etched into their faces. The city's defenders, a patchwork of regular soldiers, hastily conscripted men, and battle-hardened veterans, listened as their orders were read aloud. Aachen was to be held at all costs. Surrender was not an option. The German High Command's orders were clear and absolute. Colonel Gerhard Wilk, the city's commander, understood the consequences of defiance, but also the price of obedience. With his men outnumbered and outgunned, he knew that open battle would be suicide. Instead, he ordered his troops to transform Aachen into a fortress. Barricades sprang up overnight, machine-gun nests were established in ruined buildings, and every street corner was prepared for ambush. The city's medieval layout, with its narrow, twisting lanes and dense construction, became both shield and snare. As the deadline for surrender ticked away, tension mounted on both sides. American infantrymen waited in the shadows of shattered walls, checking their weapons and glancing nervously at the city ahead. Artillery crews stood ready, shells stacked in neat rows, their faces grim beneath steel helmets. In the German lines, young soldiers peered through the gloom, clutching rifles and listening for the first sounds of attack. Officers moved from post to post, offering words of encouragement, their own doubts hidden behind stern expressions. When the deadline passed without a response, the Americans unleashed their fury. The sky above Aachen darkened as waves of bombers roared overhead, their engines drowning out all other sounds. Bombs fell in relentless succession, tearing through rooftops, shattering bridges, and igniting fires that raged unchecked through entire neighborhoods. The city's infrastructure, railways, power stations, water lines, was systematically targeted. Each explosion a calculated blow to the defenders' ability to resist. Artillery followed, the thunder of guns echoing through the ruins. Shells crashed into buildings, sending clouds of dust and debris billowing into the air. Streets that had stood for centuries were reduced to rubble in minutes. Tanks rumbled forward, their tracks grinding over broken masonry, while infantry advanced behind, moving from cover to cover, wary of snipers and hidden machine guns. Inside the city, German soldiers fought with desperate determination. Machine gunners fired from behind sandbags, their positions shifting as buildings collapsed around them. Snipers took up positions in church towers and shattered attics, picking off advancing Americans with deadly precision. Radio operators relayed frantic messages, their hands trembling as the situation grew ever more dire. Officers scribbled reports by candlelight, the flicker of flames casting long shadows on the walls. The destruction was immense and unrelenting. Fires raged unchecked, smoke billowing into the sky and blotting out the sun. Streets became impassable, choked with debris and the twisted wreckage of vehicles. The city's defenders, cut off from reinforcements and supplies, fought on in isolated pockets, each man knowing that surrender meant court-martial or worse, but resistance meant almost certain death. For the Americans, every advance was a struggle. Medics carried wounded men through the rubble, their faces set with grim determination. Officers studied maps by flashlight, searching for weak points in the German defences. Tanks provided cover, their guns blasting holes in barricades, but progress was measured in yards, not miles. Every building cleared was a small victory, every intersection taken a hard-won prize. The battle for Aachen became a test of endurance and willpower. The city's ancient stones, once silent witnesses to centuries of history, now echoed with the sounds of gunfire, explosions, and shouted orders. The logic of total war had taken hold, and neither side could afford to yield. In the end, the choice of destruction was not made by a single man, but by the relentless machinery of war itself. The strategies employed by both sides, one seeking to break the city's resistance through overwhelming force, the other determined to hold at any cost, ensured that Aachen would be transformed from a living city into a shattered battlefield. When the guns finally fell silent, the ruins of Aachen stood as a grim testament to the price of urban combat. Every decision, every order had left its mark on the city's history and its very foundations. The men who fought there on both sides would carry the scars of that battle for the rest of their lives, and the city itself would never be the same. The battlefield of Aachen was a landscape defined by scarcity and improvisation. The defenders, though lacking in manpower, relied on a patchwork of equipment and fortifications to resist the overwhelming firepower of the attacking forces. Every street corner, every shattered window, and every pile of rubble became a potential stronghold, as the German soldiers, many of them weary veterans, others barely out of training, banded together in a desperate bid to hold the line. The German defence was anchored by a handful of battered Panzer IV tanks, and a limited number of anti-tank guns, positioned strategically among the ruins to maximize their effectiveness against advancing armor. These vehicles, often camouflaged with debris or hidden behind collapsed walls, would wait in silence for the telltale rumble of enemy engines before unleashing their firepower. Crews worked tirelessly to keep these machines running, scavenging parts from destroyed vehicles and improvising repairs under constant threat of artillery and air attack. The city itself became a formidable weapon. Streets were transformed into choke points, littered with barricades, debris and makeshift obstacles, designed to funnel enemy vehicles into kill zones. German engineers and infantrymen worked side by side, dragging furniture, carts, and even the wreckage of civilian vehicles into the streets to block the advance of American tanks. Mines and booby traps were hidden beneath the rubble, waiting for the unwary. Machine guns and anti-tank weapons, such as the Panzerfaust, were carefully emplaced at intersections and in upper stories of buildings, creating overlapping fields of fire and deadly ambush points. German marksmen, concealed behind sandbags or peering through shattered walls, waited patiently for the perfect moment to strike, their weapons trained on the narrow approaches where enemy infantry would be forced to advance. Every multi-story building was converted into a fortress with firing positions established in windows and rubble, while interconnected basements and sewers allowed for unseen movement and surprise attacks. German squads would slip through these underground passages, emerging behind enemy lines to launch sudden counterattacks, or to reinforce threatened positions. The defenders knew every twist and turn of the city's labyrinthine underbelly, using it to their advantage at every opportunity. The defenders compensated for their lack of heavy weapons and supplies by exploiting the urban terrain, turning every pile of debris into a potential strongpoint and every alleyway into a potential trap. Makeshift barricades of bricks and sandbags were thrown up overnight, while snipers and machine gunners shifted positions constantly to avoid detection and keep the attackers off balance. The battlefield conditions were harsh and unforgiving. Buildings burned, streets were cratered by artillery, and the cityscape was a maze of destruction, offering both cover and danger to those who navigated it. The air was thick with smoke and dust, the constant thunder of explosions echoing through the ruins. German soldiers, faces smeared with grime, moved from cover to cover, always alert for the next assault. The defenders' resilience was rooted in their mastery of urban warfare tactics, ambushes, hit-and-run attacks, and the use of fortified positions to delay and bleed the attackers at every turn. Officers and non-commissioned leaders gathered around battered maps, plotting the next move while runners dashed through the rubble to relay orders and coordinate the defense. For the attackers, the city presented a nightmare of close-quarters combat. Superior numbers and armor were often neutralized by the narrow streets, hidden explosives, and the defenders' intimate knowledge of the terrain. American soldiers found themselves fighting room by room, floor by floor, as German grenades and small arms fire rained down from above and from hidden alcoves. The struggle for Aachen was not just a contest of firepower, but of ingenuity and endurance, with both sides adapting their tactics to the brutal realities of urban warfare. German squads would sometimes launch sudden sallies from rooftops or cellars, catching the attackers off guard and then melting away before a counterattack could be organized. The defenders' equipment was often mismatched and in short supply, yet every available resource was pressed into service. Civilian buildings became strongholds, and every available weapon was used to maximum effect. Helmets and uniforms from earlier campaigns were mixed with newer gear, and captured Allied weapons were sometimes pressed into service when ammunition for German arms ran low. The resilience of the defense was measured not in numbers, but in the creative use of limited equipment and the relentless adaptation to the ever-changing conditions of the battlefield. In the cold, damp cellars and makeshift bunkers, German soldiers shared what little food and water remained, their resolve hardening with each passing day of the siege. In the end, the city itself became both shield and sword, its shattered streets and ruined buildings the final line of resistance against the advancing enemy. The defenders of Aachen, a motley crew of iron will, fought on amid the devastation, determined to hold every inch of ground for as long as possible, no matter the odds. The principal American assault force chosen for the operation against Aachen was the renowned 26th Infantry Regiment, instantly recognizable by its blue spaders insignia. Hardened by previous campaigns, these men were organized into several battalions, each a tightly knit brotherhood forged in the crucible of war. The 2nd and 3rd battalions were given the daunting task of leading the direct assault into the heart of the city, a mission that would test every ounce of their training and resolve. The structure of the assault force was a model of military precision. Each battalion was divided into rifle companies, each company further split into platoons and squads. The rifle companies formed the backbone of the attack, while heavy weapons platoons provided crucial support with their machine guns, mortars, and anti-tank weapons. Every man knew his role, from the squad leaders guiding their men through shattered streets to the gunners setting up their positions in the rubble, to the engineers preparing explosives for the next breach. The arsenal carried by the regiment was a testament to American industrial might. The sharp crack of the M1 Garand echoed through the streets, while the lighter M1 carbine was favoured for close-quarters fighting. Browning automatic rifles laid down suppressive fire, and the distinctive chatter of Thompson submachine guns signaled the clearing of rooms and cellars. Machine gun teams armed with .30 and .50 caliber weapons set up in windows and behind sandbags, ready to sweep the avenues with deadly fire. Bazooka teams crouched behind cover, waited for the telltale rumble of enemy armor, while tank destroyer units stood by to engage any German panzers that appeared. Mortar crews, working quickly and methodically, lobbed 60 mm and 81 mm rounds over the rooftops, their explosions marking the advance. Engineers, burdened with satchel charges and demolition tools, prepared to blast through walls and barricades, opening new paths for the assault. The operational plan for the attack on Aachen was crafted with painstaking attention to the unique dangers of urban combat. The city's maze of narrow streets, stone buildings and hidden cellars offered countless opportunities for ambush. The plan called for a synchronized advance, with infantry and armor moving in close cooperation. Sherman tanks, their engines roaring, would roll forward alongside the infantry, their main guns blasting enemy strongpoints and fortified buildings. Self-propelled artillery provided additional firepower, pounding suspected enemy positions before the infantry moved in. The men advanced in short, rapid dashes, hugging the sides of buildings, ducking through doorways and crawling through cellars to avoid the deadly fire that swept the open streets. The opening phase of the operation began with a thunderous artillery barrage. Dozens of guns unleashed a storm of shells, shattering windows, collapsing walls, and sending plumes of dust and smoke billowing into the sky. The ground shook as the barrage crept forward, and the men of the assault force pressed close behind, using the chaos as cover. Smoke shells and grenades added to the confusion, masking the movement of squads as they closed in on enemy positions. The air was thick with the acrid smell of explosives and the sharp tang of cordite. The 2nd Battalion's E and F companies led the way, advancing along the elevated railway embankment of the Horta Bridge. This route, partially shielded from enemy fire, allowed the men to reach the first blocks of the city with some measure of protection. The doctrine drilled into every soldier emphasized the use of cover and concealment. Orders were clear: avoid open streets at all costs. Instead, the men moved along the sides of buildings, slipped through cellars, and blasted holes through walls to pass from one structure to the next. Each advance was a tense, nerve-wracking affair, with every doorway and window a potential death trap. Armoured support was vital to the plan's success. Sherman tanks, their hulls scarred from previous battles, rumbled forward behind the infantry. Their progress was slow and deliberate, as the railway tunnels had been blocked by German defenders, and the streets were littered with debris and mines. Engineers, working under fire, cleared obstacles and swept for mines, allowing the tanks to keep pace with the infantry. The tanks' main guns and machine guns provided suppressive fire, blasting enemy positions and keeping defenders pinned down while the infantry advanced. The German defenders had prepared their positions with grim determination. 20 mm anti-aircraft guns, repurposed for ground defence, were hidden in courtyards and behind barricades, ready to unleash a hail of fire on any advancing troops. Machine guns were set up in windows, on rooftops, and behind piles of rubble, creating deadly crossfires. Panzerfaust teams lurked in the shadows, waiting for a tank to come within range. The Americans countered these threats with coordinated fire and movement, using covering fire to suppress enemy positions, while assault teams closed in to eliminate them. Every block was a battleground, every building a fortress to be taken by storm. Communication was the lifeline of the operation. Field radios crackled with urgent messages, while runners dashed through the chaos to deliver orders and updates. Smoke grenades and artillery-delivered smoke screens were used to mask movement, allowing squads to cross exposed ground with reduced risk. The constant roar of battle was punctuated by shouted commands, the clatter of weapons, and the distant rumble of artillery. The assault on Aachen became a textbook demonstration of American combined arms tactics in urban warfare. Infantry, armor, engineers, and artillery worked together in a deadly ballet, each element supporting the others. The careful organization, powerful weaponry, and detailed planning of the assault force were the keys to overcoming the city's formidable defenses. Every man understood the importance of his role, and the success of the mission depended on their discipline and courage under fire. On the morning of October 13th, as the first light crept over the ruined city, the assault force moved out. Under a hail of enemy fire, they began their advance, each step forward paid for in sweat and blood. The battle for Aachen had begun, a brutal, close-quarters struggle that would test the mettle of every soldier involved. The streets of Aachen, once bustling with daily life, had become a labyrinth of destruction and peril. Every shattered window, every pile of bricks, and every twisted street sign told the story of a city transformed by war. For the soldiers moving through these ruins, survival was not just a matter of skill, but of constant adaptation to an environment that seemed to conspire against them at every turn. Open boulevards, such as the main artery of Adalbert-Steinweg, were transformed into killing fields. German defenders had meticulously pre-sighted these avenues with overlapping fields of fire from machine guns, mortars, and anti-tank guns. The moment a helmet or a rifle barrel appeared in the open, a hail of bullets and shrapnel would erupt, making every exposed step a gamble with death. The evidence of failed attempts to cross these spaces was everywhere. Abandoned helmets, shattered rifles, and the twisted remains of equipment littered the streets, silent witnesses to the ferocity of the defense. Traditional battlefield tactics, open advances, flanking maneuvers, and coordinated charges quickly proved useless. The city's dense, unpredictable terrain demanded new ways of thinking. Soldiers learned to move with extreme caution, hugging the shadows of ruined corridors and ducking through shattered doorways, always wary of what might lie beyond. The battle for Aachen became a crucible of innovation. Makeshift barricades sprang up overnight, and pathways were altered as both sides sought any advantage. The city itself became a living, shifting battlefield, forcing men to improvise with every step. The most important lesson was clear: avoid the open streets at all costs. The dense urban structures offered precious cover, and soldiers quickly learned to use every wall, every pile of debris, and every blocked sightline to their advantage. Movement shifted from the streets to the interiors of buildings. The tactic known as mouse-holing became essential. Soldiers blasted holes through walls, creating hidden passageways between adjacent houses. This allowed them to move horizontally and vertically through the city, bypassing the deadly gauntlet of the streets. Mouse-holing was a dangerous and noisy business. Explosives and heavy weapons were used to breach thick masonry walls, sending clouds of dust and shards of brick into the air. Each new opening was a potential ambush point, and every breach was followed by tense moments as soldiers prepared to clear the next room. Bazookas and tank main guns were pressed into service, blasting through cellar walls and attic floors. These powerful weapons created new routes, allowing troops to move unseen from one strong point to the next, always seeking to outflank the defenders. The result was a network of interconnected rooms and floors, each one marked by the scars of battle. Soldiers advanced from room to room, floor to floor, always under cover, always alert for the next threat. This method allowed for block-by-block progress, with entire city blocks sometimes connected by interior passageways. The advance was slow, but it kept the men shielded from the deadly fire outside. Inside these ruined buildings, progress was measured in feet, not yards. Every step forward was a calculated risk, as the darkness and debris concealed countless dangers. Doorways and stairwells were often rigged with tripwires and booby traps. A careless step could trigger a hidden explosive, and every dark corner was a potential hiding place for an enemy with a submachine gun or grenade. The fighting was intimate and savage. In the confined spaces of shattered homes, men fought at arm's length, exchanging fire through holes in walls or over overturned furniture. The marks of close-quarters combat, bullet holes, bloodstains, and splintered wood were everywhere. To break through fortified positions, infantry relied on the support of tanks and armoured vehicles. These steel giants rumbled through the streets, their tracks grinding over rubble and debris, their guns blasting apart enemy strongpoints. Sherman tanks and M10 tank destroyers became mobile fortresses, providing both firepower and cover. They manoeuvred alongside buildings, using their armour to shield advancing infantry and their guns to suppress enemy positions hidden in upper floors or behind barricades. Tanks fired their machine guns into upper windows while their main guns blasted holes in fortified walls. Each shot was calculated to neutralize a threat or open a new path for the infantry. But the city was a deadly place for tanks as well. German defenders armed with Panzerfausts and other anti-tank weapons lurked in the shadows, waiting for a chance to strike at close range. The wrecks of destroyed vehicles served as grim reminders of the ever-present danger. Success depended on close coordination between infantry and armour. Radios crackled with urgent messages as squads and tank crews worked together, each movement carefully planned to minimize exposure and maximize firepower. Artillery became a weapon of precision and terror. New tactics were developed to use indirect fire in the city, with shells crashing into buildings and sending shockwaves through the rubble. Delayed fuse shells were used to penetrate multiple floors before detonating, targeting defenders hiding in upper stories or deep in basements. The thunder of explosions echoed through the city, collapsing walls and forcing defenders out of their hiding places. These tactics forced defenders to abandon their strongholds, driving them into the open where they could be targeted by infantry and armor. The balance of power shifted with every explosion as control of the city changed block by block. Every piece of equipment, from radios to rifles, was adapted for the unique challenges of urban combat. Maps were redrawn to reflect the ever-changing landscape, and new strategies were devised on the fly. The battle for Aachen was a relentless test of ingenuity and resolve. In the end, survival belonged to those who could learn, adapt, and innovate in the face of an environment that offered no mercy, only the constant, grinding challenge of urban warfare. The battle for Aachen was not merely a clash of armies, but a struggle that unfolded across the very bones of the city itself. Every street, every building, every stone became a participant in the conflict. The city's landmarks, its grand hotels, imposing hills, ancient churches, and massive bunkers were transformed from familiar fixtures into battlegrounds, their identities forever altered by the violence that swept through them. These structures, once symbols of peace, prosperity, and community, became both obstacles and objectives, shaping the strategies of the soldiers and bearing the indelible scars of war. At the heart of Aachen stood the Hotel Quellenhof, a building that had once epitomized luxury and refinement. Its marble floors and ornate chandeliers had hosted dignitaries and travellers from across Europe. But as the battle raged, the hotel's grandeur was subsumed by necessity. Its thick stone walls, designed to impress, now served as a fortress, bristling with machine guns and sandbags. German troops converted the elegant lobby into a command post, maps and radios replacing the finery, while the upper floors became firing positions, each shattered window a potential threat to advancing American forces. The transformation was total. The hotel's corridors, once echoing with the footsteps of guests, now rang with the bark of orders and the clatter of boots. Barricades of overturned furniture and sandbags blocked the grand staircases. Every room became a potential strong point, every collapsed archway a reminder of the relentless shelling. The defenders, determined to hold their ground, used the hotel's labyrinthine layout to their advantage, setting traps and ambushes for any who dared to enter. The relentless artillery bombardment left the hotel's facade pockmarked and broken. Chunks of masonry littered the once pristine gardens. The building, which had stood as a beacon of hospitality, was now a battered monument to the ferocity of urban warfare, its walls bearing the scars of every shell and bullet that struck them. Outside, the streets that had once bustled with daily life were reduced to a maze of rubble and debris. Tanks rumbled through the ruins, their treads grinding over shattered glass and broken stone. The destruction of infrastructure, collapsed buildings, cratered roads and tangled wires, created a landscape that was both treacherous and tactically significant. Soldiers moved cautiously, using the wreckage for cover as they fought for control of the city's vital crossroads. Every intersection a potential killing ground. The American response was overwhelming firepower. The 155mm Long Tom artillery pieces were brought forward, their barrels aimed directly at the hotel's formidable walls. Each thunderous shot sent shockwaves through the city, tearing open gaping wounds in the structure. The silhouette of the Quellenhof, once a proud feature of the Aachen skyline, was forever altered, its upper floors blasted open, its roofline jagged and incomplete. The breaches in the hotel's defences became entry points for the final assault. American infantry, moving cautiously through clouds of dust and smoke, advanced room by room. The once pristine halls were reduced to piles of stone and dust, echoing with the memory of gunfire and shouted commands. Every step forward was contested, every doorway a potential ambush. To the north, Lausberg Hill loomed over the city, its slopes covered in trees and brush. The hill's elevation provided a commanding view of Aachen and the surrounding countryside, making it a critical vantage point for both observation and artillery direction. German spotters, perched in concealed positions, relayed coordinates to batteries hidden in the city's outskirts, directing deadly barrages onto advancing American units. The strategic significance of Lausberg Hill was clear to both sides. From its summit, artillery fire could be adjusted with deadly precision, and the slopes became a natural barrier, channeling the movement of forces and shaping the lines of engagement. The Americans launched repeated assaults, each one met with fierce resistance from entrenched defenders who knew every contour of the ground. The struggle for Lausberg Hill left the landscape scarred and unrecognizable. Trenches were carved into the earth, shell craters dotted the slopes, and the remnants of fortifications stood as silent witnesses to the intensity of the fighting. The air was thick with the smell of cordite and churned soil, the sounds of battle echoing across the hillside. Atop the hill, the command bunker, once the nerve center of the city's defense, remained embedded in the hillside. Its reinforced concrete walls, designed to withstand the heaviest bombardments, bore the marks of repeated assaults. Inside, German officers coordinated the defense, their voices tense as the sounds of battle drew ever closer. The slopes themselves, once green and tranquil, were transformed into a landscape of churned earth and shattered stone. American soldiers, burdened with heavy packs and weapons, scrambled uphill under fire, seeking cover behind rocks and fallen trees. The defenders, dug in and determined, fought with grim resolve, turning every metre of ground into a deadly contest. The eventual capture of the hill marked a turning point in the battle. As American troops raised their flag over the battered summit, the defenders withdrew, leaving behind a landscape forever changed. The hill, once a symbol of natural beauty, now stood as a testament to the shifting tide of the conflict. Throughout Aachen, places of peace and remembrance became unintended battlegrounds. Churches, with their soaring arches and stained glass, provided cover and observation points. Cemeteries, with their rows of white tombstones, became fields of conflict, the ground churned by explosions and the monuments chipped and broken by stray rounds. The tall steeple of St. Joseph's Church, rising above the rooftops, became a coveted observation post. German spotters used its height to direct artillery fire, while American gunners targeted the silhouette, leaving the stonework pitted and scarred by shell fire. The church, once a beacon of faith, was now a landmark of war. In the cemeteries, soldiers took cover among the tombstones, the dead of previous generations joined by the casualties of the present conflict. The monuments, chipped and broken, bore silent witness to the chaos that raged around them. The ground, once tended and peaceful, was now torn and cratered, a grim reminder of the cost of war. Among the most imposing structures in Aachen were the massive public air raid shelters. These multi-story concrete bunkers built to shield civilians from aerial bombardment became focal points of the battle. Their thick walls, designed to withstand the heaviest bombs, resisted even the most determined attacks, turning each bunker into a fortress within the city. Inside, the air was thick with dust and tension. The narrow corridors echoed with the sounds of boots and whispered orders. Every steel door was a potential choke point, every stairwell a place of danger. The defenders, knowing the value of these strongholds, fought with desperation, determined to hold out as long as possible. The entrances to these bunkers, narrow and easily defended, became scenes of intense combat. American soldiers, wary of booby traps and ambushes, advanced cautiously, their weapons at the ready. The interiors, once a refuge, now echoed with the tension of siege and the uncertainty of what lay beyond each steel door. Some bunkers, battered but unyielding, stood as symbols of resistance. Their concrete facades, blackened by fire and pitted by shrapnel, bore silent testimony to the determination of those who defended them. Even as the city around them fell, these fortresses held out, their defenders refusing to surrender. The use of flamethrowers and explosives left unmistakable marks on the walls. Scorch marks and blast patterns told the story of desperate measures taken to force a surrender. The heat of battle was etched into the very fabric of the city, every blackened wall a reminder of the struggle that had taken place. The terrifying hiss of flamethrowers filled the air as liquid fire splashed against concrete, leaving blackened streaks and warped metal. The defenders, trapped inside, faced a choice between surrender and annihilation. The psychological impact of such weapons was as profound as the physical destruction they caused. In the aftermath, the evidence of battle was everywhere. Warped steel doors, scorched entryways, and burned-out equipment littered the ground. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the distant rumble of artillery and the cautious footsteps of soldiers moving through the ruins. As the doors to the bunkers finally opened, the battered exteriors stood in stark contrast to the devastation outside. The survival of these structures was a testament to the engineering skill and the desperation of those who built and defended them. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the lingering fear of what might come next. The city's landmarks, its hotels, hills, churches, cemeteries, and bunkers, were forever changed by the battle. Each bore the marks of conflict, their forms altered and their purposes redefined by the violence that swept through Aachen. The city itself became a living record of the struggle, every scar a story, every ruin a reminder. In the aftermath, these structures stood as silent witnesses to the devastation. Exhausted soldiers slumped against battered walls, their faces etched with fatigue and relief. The battered facades and scarred exteriors of Aachen's landmarks served as a lasting reminder of the city's ordeal and of the enduring impact of war on the landscape itself. Beyond the strategies and battalion maneuvers, the Battle of Aachen was defined by the equipment and technology that shaped its outcome. In the chaos of urban warfare, every piece of gear, every weapon, and every radio transmission could mean the difference between life and death. The ubiquitous M4 Sherman tank was a cornerstone of the American advance. Its distinctive silhouette rumbled through the narrow, debris-choked streets, the roar of its engine echoing off shattered walls. Tank crews, faces smeared with grime, worked in tight coordination with infantry, their voices crackling over intercoms as they navigated the urban labyrinth. The Sherman's mobility and firepower were crucial for supporting the men on foot, who often found themselves pinned down by enemy fire from hidden positions. Armed with a 75 mm main gun and protected by sloped armor, the Sherman could engage enemy strongpoints, blasting holes in barricades and suppressing machine gun nests. Its presence provided a moving wall of steel, behind which squads of GIs advanced, darting from doorway to doorway, always wary of snipers and Panzerfausts lurking in the shadows. Communication technology, such as the SCR-300 radio, was the invisible thread binding the assault together. Radiomen crouched behind cover, antennae poking above the rubble, relaying urgent messages between platoons and command posts. Orders to advance, requests for artillery support, and warnings of enemy counterattacks all travelled through the static-filled airwaves, allowing for coordinated assaults and rapid adaptation to the ever-changing battlefield. Combat engineers, burdened with heavy packs, moved forward under covering fire. They carried Bangalore torpedoes, long tubes packed with explosives, used to clear barbed wire and debris blocking the way. With steady hands, they assembled the torpedoes, slid them under obstacles, and ducked for cover as thunderous explosions tore open new paths for the advancing infantry. Demolition charges were set against reinforced doors and walls, their detonations echoing through the city's hollowed-out buildings. The standard-issue M1 Garand rifle and Browning automatic rifle were the backbone of the American infantrymen. Soldiers gripped these weapons tightly as they moved from cover to cover, their boots crunching on broken glass and spent shell casings. Grenades were always within reach, ready to be hurled into darkened doorways or upper floors where the enemy might be waiting. Ammunition was precious, and resupply parties risked their lives to keep the front lines stocked. Aerial reconnaissance and detailed maps were vital tools for commanders. Pilots braved flak to photograph enemy positions from above, while intelligence officers pored over the images, marking suspected strongpoints and routes of advance. These maps, often annotated with grease pencils and hastily drawn arrows, allowed for precise planning and targeting, giving the Americans a technological edge in the urban maze. Anti-tank guns, such as the 57mm M1, were positioned at key intersections and choke points. Their crews waited in silence, scanning the streets for the telltale rumble of enemy armor. When German tanks appeared, the gunners sprang into action, unleashing armor-piercing rounds that could turn the tide of a skirmish in seconds. The M2 flamethrower was a weapon both feared and respected. Its operator, often the target of enemy snipers, advanced with the support of his squad. With a burst of fire, the flamethrower could clear bunkers and fortified cellars, the searing jets forcing defenders to surrender or flee. The psychological impact was immense. Few could withstand the terror of fire sweeping through confined spaces. Standard procedures called for the use of explosives and flamethrowers to clear enemy strongpoints. Infantrymen would stack up at doorways, tossing grenades, and follow with a rush, while engineers set charges to breach walls. The goal was always to minimize risk to the attackers, using technology and firepower to overwhelm defenders before they could react. The controlled use of flamethrowers could force enemy positions to surrender without a direct assault, demonstrating the versatility and psychological power of battlefield technology. In some cases, entire squads of defenders emerged from their hiding places, hands raised, unwilling to face the inferno. These tactics preserved what little remained of Aachen's infrastructure and reduced unnecessary destruction. Engineers and officers weighed each decision carefully, knowing that every building lost was another piece of the city's history erased by war. On the other side, German defenders relied on Panzerfaust anti-tank weapons, machine guns, and stockpiled ammunition. In the dim light of cellars and bunkers, soldiers checked their weapons, distributed grenades, and prepared for the next assault. The Panzerfaust, a simple but deadly weapon, was their answer to the American tanks prowling the streets above. Makeshift barricades, sandbags, and anti-tank obstacles transformed city streets into formidable defensive lines. German engineers worked through the night, reinforcing positions with whatever materials they could find. Overturned vehicles, rubble, and even furniture from abandoned homes. Supplies of food, water, and ammunition were stored in cellars and bunkers, sustaining the defenders during the prolonged siege. Runners dashed between positions, braving artillery fire to deliver crates of rifle rounds or canisters of water to isolated squads. German field radios and signal equipment enabled coordination between scattered defensive positions. Even as American forces closed in, messages continued to flow, requests for reinforcements, reports of ammunition shortages, and last-ditch orders to hold at all costs. The clash of armored vehicles and anti-tank weapons turned residential blocks into battlegrounds. The thunder of tank guns, the rattle of machine gun fire, and the sharp crack of rifles filled the air, with technology dictating the tempo and ferocity of the fight. The aftermath revealed the destructive power of modern weaponry. Streets were littered with the twisted remains of vehicles, shattered equipment, and the scars of relentless bombardment, a grim testament to the cost of technological escalation. German command posts, often deep underground or hidden in ruined buildings, were equipped with field telephones, radios, and detailed maps. Officers huddled over tables, plotting the next move even as the walls shook from nearby explosions. Defensive technology, including anti-tank guns and reinforced positions, was deployed to maximize the effectiveness of limited resources. Every gun, every shell, and every sandbag was counted and put to use in the desperate defense of the city. The defenders made use of every available weapon, from rifles to Panzerfausts, in a last-ditch attempt to hold the city. In the darkness of the bunkers, men waited for the next attack, listening to the distant rumble of tanks and the staccato bursts of gunfire above. As the battle wore on, the strain on equipment and supplies became evident. Command centers, once bustling with activity, now operated with dwindling resources, their operators working by the light of flickering lamps as they tried to maintain control. In the final hours, technology remained at the heart of the conflict. Deep beneath Lausberg Hill, communication equipment relayed the last desperate orders, radios crackling with static as the sounds of battle echoed through the concrete corridors. Above, the city burned, but below, the struggle for control continued until the very end. By October 20th, the defenders of Aachen found themselves in a dire predicament. The once formidable German garrison, now battered and depleted, was hemmed in on all sides by the relentless American advance. The city, once bustling with life, had been reduced to a smouldering ruin, its streets choked with rubble and the acrid stench of burning debris. The defenders, isolated in pockets of resistance, could only watch as the American forces tightened their grip, block by block, building by building. The Americans advanced with methodical precision, employing a combination of infantry, armor, and artillery to systematically reduce the German perimeter. Tanks rumbled through the shattered streets, their treads grinding over broken masonry, while infantry squads moved cautiously from cover to cover, clearing out strong points with grenades and close-quarters fire. Each intersection became a battleground, each ruined building a potential fortress. The defenders, cut off from reinforcements and resupply, were forced to fall back again and again, compressing into a shrinking enclave at the city's heart. At the center of this shrinking defensive ring stood the final German command post, a massive, reinforced concrete bunker dug deep into Lausberg Hill. Designed to withstand the heaviest bombardment, the bunker was a fortress within a fortress. Its thick steel doors were scarred by shrapnel and its camouflaged ventilation shafts barely visible amid the debris. Communication cables snaked underground, connecting the command post to the last scattered outposts. Inside, Officers pored over maps illuminated by flickering lanterns, their faces drawn and grim as they issued orders to the few remaining units. The logistical situation was catastrophic. Ammunition was running dangerously low. Soldiers rationed their last magazines and machine guns fell silent for lack of bullets. Medical supplies were exhausted, leaving the wounded to suffer in makeshift aid stations, tended by weary medics with little more than bandages and morphine. The city's infrastructure, once a lifeline for the defenders, had been severed by the encirclement. No food, no water, no hope of relief. Yet within the bunker, discipline held. Officers and enlisted men alike clung to their duties, maintaining a semblance of order amid the chaos. The command post, though battered, remained a hive of activity. Radios crackled with terse messages, and runners darted through the labyrinthine corridors, relaying final defensive directives. Every man knew the situation was hopeless, but the code of duty demanded that they hold out as long as possible. In a final gesture of defiance and tradition, commendations for acts of valor were prepared. Iron crosses and other decorations were laid out on a battered table, their significance now more symbolic than practical. For the men in the bunker, these medals were a fleeting reminder of honor in the face of overwhelming adversity, but the reality outside the bunker's thick walls was inescapable. Defensive positions, once bristling with weapons and determination, now stood empty. Firing slits gaped into the darkness, their machine guns abandoned. Helmets and rifles lay scattered in the dust, silent witnesses to the collapse of resistance. On October 21st, the American assault reached its crescendo. Artillery shells rained down on the bunker, their explosions shaking the very foundations of the hill. The reinforced walls shuddered under the impact, and smoke billowed from every vent and crack. Small arms fire rattled against the steel doors, and the last lines of communication were severed as cables were cut and radios destroyed. Inside, the command staff faced the inevitable. Recognizing the futility of further resistance, they convened in the dimly lit operations room. A formal note of capitulation was drafted, its language precise and unambiguous. The universally recognized symbol of surrender, a white flag, was prepared to be displayed at the bunker's entrance. The surrender protocol was clear. The white flag would be raised at the main entrance, and the surrender note would be transmitted to the American lines. The defenders, exhausted and hollow-eyed, gathered in the corridors, awaiting the order to cease fire. Outside, the battlefield fell eerily silent as the flag was hoisted into the smoky dusk. The note and flag were carried through the maze-like corridors of the bunker, past abandoned equipment and hastily discarded maps. Emerging into the open, the surrender party was met by wary American soldiers, their weapons at the ready, but their eyes betraying a sense of relief that the bloodshed was finally ending. The appearance of the truce signal brought an immediate halt to the fighting. Both sides, exhausted by days of brutal combat, recognized the formal initiation of surrender. Officers removed their caps in silent acknowledgement, and the battered insignia of the defeated command was laid on the table as a token of submission. In accordance with military protocol, the command post was formally surrendered. Documentation was signed, and the keys to the fortifications were handed over to the American officers. The fire still smouldered in the ruins outside, casting flickering shadows over the scene of capitulation. The raising of the American flag over the captured bunker was a moment of profound significance. For the victors, it marked the end of a costly and grueling campaign. For the defeated, it was the final, undeniable symbol of their loss. The flag fluttered in the smoky air, visible for miles across the devastated cityscape. In the aftermath, the true scale of destruction became apparent. The city's infrastructure was in ruins, bridges collapsed, roads impassable, and communication lines severed. The once vibrant city was now a ghostly wasteland, its silence broken only by the distant rumble of departing artillery. Defensive emplacements, once bristling with weapons and hope, now stood empty and battered. Sandbags were torn open, trenches filled with debris, and the strategic value of these positions erased by the relentless siege. Inside the command bunker, the chaos of battle was replaced by an eerie silence. Maps, radios, and field telephones lay abandoned on tables, their purpose spent. The men who had manned these stations were now prisoners, their war over. The city itself was transformed into a landscape of devastation. Streets once filled with the sounds of daily life were now empty, lined with collapsed buildings and drifting smoke. The scars of battle were everywhere, a testament to the ferocity of the fighting. The logistical challenges facing the victors were immense. Destroyed bridges and rail lines, severed supply routes and impassable roads made the task of occupation and reconstruction daunting. For the local population and the occupying forces alike, the road to recovery would be long and arduous. The surrender of the bunker and the city was more than a tactical victory. It was a stark demonstration of the immense cost of urban warfare, measured not just in territory gained or lost, but in the shattered infrastructure and the lives forever changed. In the end, the empty fortifications and ruined city squares stood as silent witnesses to the price of resistance and the overwhelming destructive power of modern siege tactics. The story of Aachen's fall was written in fire and steel, a chapter of history forged in the crucible of urban combat. The victory at Aachen left behind not only human tragedy, but a landscape deeply and visibly wounded. As the last echoes of gunfire faded, the city stood in silence, its streets and buildings bearing the unmistakable marks of relentless combat. The city's environment was transformed into a shattered maze of collapsed buildings, scorched streets, and cratered earth. Once orderly city blocks were reduced to piles of debris, with entire neighborhoods erased from the map. The relentless artillery and bombing left deep gouges in the ground, turning parks and gardens into barren, lifeless craters. Rubble and twisted metal littered the streets, while the city's infrastructure, roads, bridges, and rail lines, was left in ruins. Defensive positions and fortifications, now abandoned, scarred the landscape with trenches, bunkers, and shattered barricades. The city's rivers and streams, once sources of life, ran dark with debris and pollution from the destruction. The air itself was thick with dust and smoke, lingering for weeks after the last shots were fired. The scars of artillery and bombs were etched into every surface, walls, streets, and the very earth itself. The city's natural environment suffered as well, with trees splintered and green spaces obliterated by the fighting. In the aftermath, Aachen stood as a silent testament to devastation, its buildings hollowed, its streets empty, its landscape forever altered. The process of rebuilding was slow and painstaking. Before new life could return, the city had to be cleared of rubble and unexploded ordnance. Damaged structures were stabilized or demolished, and the foundations of new buildings were laid atop the ruins of the old. The city's rivers and water systems had to be cleared and restored, as pollution and debris had choked their flow. Roads and bridges were rebuilt, reconnecting the fractured city and allowing for the return of commerce and daily life. Yet, even as new buildings rose, the landscape retained the memory of war. Some ruins were left standing as silent witnesses, their broken walls and scorched stones a permanent part of the city's environment. The ground itself, pitted with craters and trenches, took years to heal, and in some places the scars remain visible to this day. Over time, nature began to reclaim the most devastated areas. Grass and wildflowers sprouted in the cracks of ruined foundations, and trees slowly returned to the battered parks. The city's skyline changed, blending the old and the new, with restored landmarks standing beside modern structures. Today, Aachen's environment is a tapestry of renewal and remembrance. The cathedral, once threatened by destruction, stands restored, its stones bearing the marks of repair and survival. Streets that were once impassable are now lined with new buildings, but The patterns of destruction can still be traced in the city's layout. In some places, open spaces and parks exist where entire blocks once stood, a result of post-war urban planning and the impossibility of rebuilding on ground too damaged to restore. The memory of October 1944 is etched not only in monuments, but in the very stones and soil of Aachen. If you look closely, the scars of battle are still visible: chipped masonry, patched walls, and the subtle undulations of ground once torn by shells. On the corners of older buildings, the distinctive gouges left by tank shells remain silent evidence of the city's violent past. These marks, created to clear blind corners, are now part of the city's architectural memory. In the stone walls of churches and old apartment blocks, pockmarks from bullets and shrapnel remain, weathered but unmistakable. These physical scars are a quiet, permanent reminder of the battle's terrible cost, woven into the city's very fabric. The landscape of Aachen, shaped by destruction and renewal, stands as a testament to the endurance of place. The environment itself is a memorial, bearing witness to the events that unfolded and the transformation that followed. The Battle of Aachen was more than a strategic victory. It was a turning point in the city's physical history. The scars of war, both visible and hidden, continue to shape the city's landscape and identity. Aachen's rebuilt streets and restored landmarks stand as a reminder of the city's journey from devastation to renewal. The city's environment is a powerful symbol of both the destructive fury of war and the resilience of the land itself. In the contrast between ruins and renewal, Aachen's landscape tells the enduring story of survival, transformation, and hope. Every stone, every scar, every rebuilt street is a chapter in the city's ongoing story, a story written by the hands of soldiers, the force of artillery, and the slow, determined work of rebuilding. The memory of the battle lingers, not only in monuments and photographs, but in the very bones of the city itself. Before the first shot was ever fired, Aachen was already a fortress. Its very streets, buildings and ancient walls had been shaped by centuries of conflict, but in the years leading up to World War II, the city was transformed with a single purpose: to withstand a modern siege. As the Allies advanced toward Aachen, they confronted not just a city, but a living, breathing machine of defense. Every approach was watched, every street a potential trap. The city's defenders had spent months preparing for this moment, turning Aachen into a fortress that would test the resolve of any attacker. Decades of military planning had transformed Aachen's urban landscape into a labyrinth of obstacles and strongpoints. Streets twisted and turned, lined with barricades and hidden firing positions. Every intersection was a potential kill zone, every alley a possible ambush site. The city itself became a weapon, designed to bleed any force that dared to enter. The city's outermost ring was marked by anti-tank ditches, broad, deep trenches carved into the earth, stretching for hundreds of meters. These obstacles were not just physical barriers, they were psychological ones, forcing tank crews to halt and infantry to dismount under the watchful eyes of hidden defenders. These ditches were reinforced by rows of dragon's teeth, massive reinforced concrete pyramids set in staggered lines. Their jagged forms jutted from the ground, creating a maze that could trap or immobilize even the heaviest Allied armor. Engineers had carefully placed these obstacles to funnel vehicles into pre-sighted kill zones where anti-tank guns and artillery waited in silence. In open spaces and along key avenues, barbed wire entanglements snaked across the ground, forming lethal webs that could ensnare advancing infantry. These wire barriers were often hidden among the rubble, invisible until it was too late, and sometimes laced with mines or booby traps to catch the unwary. At critical crossroads and intersections, defenders erected concrete roadblocks and steel barricades. These obstacles forced attackers to slow down, bunch up, and expose themselves to fire from concealed positions. Each barricade was a choke point, designed to break the momentum of any assault and channel troops into narrow, deadly corridors. The city's own destruction became its shield. Streets were lined with makeshift barricades of rubble and debris, deliberately piled to create firing positions and block the advance of vehicles. Behind these walls, German soldiers waited, rifles and machine guns trained on every approach. Even beneath the streets, danger lurked. Sewer grates and manholes were reinforced with steel or booby-trapped with explosives, denying attackers the chance to use the city's underground passages for surprise attacks or infiltration. The heart of Aachen bristled with bunkers, thick-walled concrete fortresses, some cleverly camouflaged within the facades of civilian buildings, others standing alone on street corners or buried beneath parks. These bunkers were the backbone of the city's defense, each one a self-contained stronghold with its own garrison, supplies, and fields of fire. Beneath the surface, a network of tunnels and communication trenches connected these bunkers, allowing defenders to move unseen from one strong point to another. This subterranean web meant that even if one position fell, reinforcements could arrive from unexpected directions, and defenders could slip away to fight another day. Gun ports, narrow and well protected, peered out from behind layers of steel and concrete. From these slits, machine gunners and riflemen could sweep the streets with fire, their positions nearly impervious to return shots. Every approach was covered, every angle calculated for maximum effect. On the rooftops, sandbagged emplacements and sniper nests overlooked the city's main avenues. From these high vantage points, sharpshooters could pick off advancing troops, while in the cellars below, machine guns and mortars waited in darkness, ready to unleash sudden devastating fire. Stairwells, courtyards, and alleys were transformed into deadly traps. Barricades blocked the way, and loopholes, small openings cut into walls, allowed defenders to fire at close range without exposing themselves. Every corner could hide a rifleman, every doorway a grenade. Bridges and rail lines, so vital for movement and supply, were rigged with explosives. At a moment's notice, entire spans could be blown sky-high, cutting off routes and trapping attackers in the city's maze of defences. Even Aachen's ancient walls and historic gates were pressed into service. Medieval stonework was reinforced with concrete and steel, transforming these relics of the past into modern bastions, bristling with gun ports and observation slits. Every feature of the urban landscape was used for defence. Tram lines were blocked with overturned cars. Garden walls thickened with sandbags, and even ornamental fountains were surrounded by barbed wire, denying cover and movement to the enemy. The city became a maze of interlocking fields of fire. Defensive lines overlapped, creating zones where attackers would be caught in a deadly crossfire. Every street, every square, every open space was calculated to slow, confuse, and wear down the enemy. In the silence before battle, these fortifications stood ready, silent, imposing, and unmanned, waiting for the storm to break over Aachen's formidable defences. The city was a fortress in every sense, its defenders prepared to fight for every inch, and its streets destined to become the stage for one of the fiercest urban battles of the war. As the siege of Aachen began in earnest, the city's defenders braced themselves against a relentless and unyielding barrage of artillery fire. Day and night, the thunder of distant guns rolled across the shattered rooftops, each salvo sending fountains of debris skyward and shaking the very foundations of the ancient city. The defenders, huddled in cellars and behind hastily reinforced walls, could do little but endure as the storm of steel rained down upon them. Meanwhile, American and British armoured columns ground forward, their tanks crawling over heaps of broken masonry and twisted metal. Infantrymen advanced in the shadow of these steel giants, darting from cover to cover as enemy fire snapped overhead. The city's narrow streets became a deadly labyrinth where every intersection and ruined building could conceal a threat. Artillery batteries were meticulously positioned on the outskirts, their barrels elevated and locked onto the city's most formidable strongpoints. Teams of gunners worked in concert, relaying coordinates, adjusting elevation and bracing themselves for the recoil as each gun thundered in turn. The American M101 howitzers, manned by determined crews, unleashed a steady rhythm of high-explosive shells. Each round was loaded with practiced speed, the gunners' faces set in grim concentration as they worked to keep up the relentless tempo. Alongside them, British 25-pounder field guns barked in carefully timed salvos, their shells arcing over the city's battered skyline to detonate with devastating effect. The coordination between batteries was precise, creating overlapping fields of fire that left defenders with nowhere to hide. Barrages were directed at anti-tank ditches, concrete bunkers, and intersections barricaded with rubble and steel. Each explosion sent clouds of dust and fragments billowing through the streets, collapsing walls and shattering defensive positions. The defenders, battered and disoriented, scrambled to regroup as the city's landscape was reshaped by fire. To mask their movements and sow confusion, Allied forces fired smoke shells that billowed through the streets, turning the city into a ghostly maze. Under this cover, squads of soldiers advanced, their silhouettes flickering in and out of the swirling haze as they pressed the attack. White phosphorus rounds followed, igniting fires that swept through ruined buildings and forced defenders from their hiding places. The acrid smoke and searing flames added a new layer of terror to the already hellish battlefield, driving men from cover and exposing them to the guns of the advancing attackers. Self-propelled artillery, such as the American M7 Priest, rumbled into position behind the front lines. These mobile guns could quickly shift their firing points, keeping up with the pace of the assault and delivering rapid, concentrated fire wherever it was needed most. On the German side, Vesper self-propelled guns maneuvered through the ruins, their crews expertly finding covered positions from which to launch counter-barrages. The duel between mobile artillery pieces became a deadly game of cat and mouse, with each side seeking to outmaneuver and outgun the other. Artillery crews, both Allied and German, worked feverishly to adjust their guns, calculating new trajectories and rates of fire as the battle shifted from block to block. The air was thick with the roar of outgoing shells and the concussive blasts of impacts, as positions were saturated and counter-attacks suppressed before they could gain momentum. Armoured vehicles pressed forward, their engines roaring and treads grinding over the debris-strewn streets. The tanks' thick armour shielded their crews from small arms fire, but every corner and alley held the threat of hidden anti-tank weapons or ambush. M4 Sherman tanks advanced in disciplined columns, their 75mm and 76mm guns firing at suspected enemy positions. Each shot was aimed at bunkers, sniper nests, and fortified buildings, the tanks' crews working in unison to clear a path for the infantry. German Panther tanks, with their sloped armour and powerful guns, lurked in the shadows of ruined buildings, while Tiger tanks, concealed among the rubble, waited for the perfect moment to strike. Their cannons roared, sending armour-piercing rounds down narrow streets and across open squares, seeking out enemy tanks and exploiting every opportunity to ambush the advancing columns. Tank destroyers like the American M10 Wolverine moved with caution and purpose, using the city's debris as cover. German Jagdpanzer IVs prowled the ruins as well, their low profiles and powerful guns making them deadly adversaries. Both sides used hull-down positions behind barricades and piles of rubble, waiting for the enemy to reveal themselves before unleashing a devastating shot. The low silhouettes of these tank destroyers allowed them to slip through the city's narrow streets, their guns ready to fire at a moment's notice. In the close confines of Aachen, a single well-placed shot could decide the fate of an entire engagement. Assault guns, including the German Sturmgeschütz III, provided direct fire support for the infantry, blasting apart concrete emplacements and barricades with high-explosive shells. Each detonation tore new breaches in Aachen's defences, opening the way for further assaults and forcing the defenders to fall back again and again. Even anti-aircraft flak guns were pressed into service, their rapid-fire shells raking the streets and intersections. These weapons, originally designed to bring down enemy aircraft, now added a deadly layer to the city's defense, cutting down attackers who dared to cross open ground. The clash of artillery and armor left Aachen unrecognizable. From above, the city appeared as a wasteland of shattered buildings, cratered streets, and the burned-out hulks of tanks and vehicles. Buildings collapsed under the relentless bombardment, their facades crumbling as tanks forced their way through the wreckage. The very streets seemed to groan under the weight of war. The thunder of artillery and the roar of tank guns echoed endlessly through the maze of concrete and stone, a constant reminder of the battle's ferocity. In this brutal contest of firepower and steel, every weapon, every tactic, and every shot played a part in shaping the fate of Aachen. The city became a crucible where the courage and determination of its defenders and attackers alike were tested to the very limit. As the battle for Aachen raged on, the city itself stood as a mute testament to the relentless violence of modern warfare. Each street, once alive with the daily rhythms of city life, now echoed only with the thunder of artillery and the distant rumble of tanks. The city's orderly streets and historic squares, which had witnessed centuries of peace and celebration, were now shattered by the ceaseless pounding of shells. Artillery fire tore through the pavement, leaving deep craters and jagged scars, while tanks ground forward, their treads crushing debris beneath them as they advanced through the chaos. Buildings that had stood for generations, churches, townhouses, and shops, collapsed into heaps of stone and twisted metal. Their facades, once proud and ornate, were now pockmarked by shrapnel and blackened by fire. Inside, rooms were gutted, their contents strewn across the floors, the walls barely holding together as the structure threatened to give way at any moment. The city's infrastructure, from the ancient cobblestone roads to the intricate web of sewer systems beneath, was torn apart. Water mains burst, flooding cellars and streets, while the sewers, once a hidden lifeline, became choked with rubble and debris, rendering them impassable. Bridges that had once spanned Aachen's waterways, connecting neighbourhoods and facilitating commerce, were reduced to tangled wreckage. Their graceful arches and sturdy supports were blasted apart, leaving only twisted steel and broken stone jutting from the riverbanks. Thick clouds of dust and debris hung in the air, drifting through shattered windows and settling over every surface. The sun, when it managed to break through the haze, cast an eerie glow over the ruins, illuminating the endless piles of rubble that now defined the cityscape. Landmarks that had been familiar to generations, statues, fountains, and clock towers, vanished beneath layers of destruction. Their outlines were barely discernible amid the chaos, reduced to little more than shadows in the dust. The transformation of Aachen's cityscape was absolute. What had once been a vibrant urban centre was now a wasteland, every block marked by devastation, every street corner a reminder of the battle's intensity. Streets became impassable, choked with the remnants of collapsed buildings and the hulks of destroyed vehicles. Trucks and tanks, abandoned where they had been hit, blocked passage, their metal frames twisted and scorched. Alleyways that once offered shortcuts for deliverymen and soldiers alike now formed labyrinths of debris. Moving through them required climbing over mounds of brick and ducking beneath precarious beams, every step slow and fraught with danger. Craters pockmarked intersections, some large enough to swallow a vehicle whole. Toppled streetcars lay on their sides, their windows shattered, while lampposts, once lighting the way for late-night travellers, now lay twisted and broken, creating new hazards at every turn. The destruction of urban infrastructure did more than scar the city. It reshaped the very nature of the conflict. Soldiers found themselves fighting not just the enemy, but the city itself, navigating a landscape that changed with every explosion. Tanks and armoured vehicles struggled to navigate the maze of broken masonry and steel. Their progress was hindered by blocked roads, unstable ground, and the ever-present threat of ambush from hidden corners or upper floors of ruined buildings. Artillery shells carved new paths through thick stone walls and once private courtyards, creating makeshift routes for advancing troops. But these new passages were unpredictable, often leading into fresh dangers or dead ends. The city's transformation into a landscape of rubble and ruin dictated the pace and tactics of battle. Aachen became a fortress of stone, one forged not by the hands of its builders but by the destructive force of war itself. Every shattered wall and pile of debris became both obstacle and shield, shaping the fate of those who fought within its ruins. As the battle for Aachen unfolded, the city's environment became a silent but relentless adversary. The once bustling streets were now a maze of destruction, with every corner hiding potential danger. Autumn rains swept across the region, soaking shattered streets and transforming rubble-strewn alleys into slick, treacherous pathways. Soldiers had to navigate these hazardous conditions, their every step fraught with the risk of slipping or falling. Thick mud clung to tank treads and boots alike, slowing the advance of armoured columns and making even the simplest movements a struggle. The mud seemed to have a life of its own, pulling at the soldiers' feet and making every step a battle in itself. Puddles gathered in shell craters while broken sewers spilled water into basements and cellars, flooding hiding places and supply caches. The waterlogged conditions turned potential shelters into traps, forcing soldiers to constantly seek new cover. Low-hanging clouds and persistent drizzle muffled the sounds of distant artillery, cloaking the city in a constant damp haze. The fog and rain created an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional crack of gunfire or the distant rumble of explosions. Visibility dropped as fog rolled in, obscuring ruins and turning each intersection into a realm of uncertainty. Soldiers moved cautiously, their senses heightened as they tried to anticipate threats hidden in the mist. The sun, when it appeared, cast a pale, muted light over the devastated landscape, offering little warmth against the chill. The cold seeped into the bones of the soldiers, adding another layer of discomfort to their already grueling ordeal. Wind whipped through shattered windows and collapsed roofs, scattering dust and debris through the empty streets. The howling wind added to the sense of desolation, as if the city itself was mourning its own destruction. Smoke from smouldering fires mingled with the mist, creating a dense, acrid atmosphere that lingered over the city. The air was thick with the smell of burning, a constant reminder of the ongoing conflict. The shifting weather patterns complicated aerial reconnaissance and disrupted the accuracy of artillery fire, forcing constant adaptation. Pilots and artillery crews had to adjust their strategies on the fly, dealing with the unpredictable elements as best they could. These environmental hardships did not discriminate. Every soldier, regardless of rank or role, faced the same relentless rain, biting wind, and ever-present mud. The relentless rain, biting wind, and ever-present mud shaped the outcome of the battle as surely as any weapon. The soldiers' endurance and resilience were tested to their limits as they fought not only the enemy, but also the unforgiving elements. In Aachen, the elements themselves became a formidable part of the city's defense, transforming the ruins of stone into a battleground governed by nature's unpredictable hand. The weather and environment played a crucial role, influencing tactics and shaping the course of the conflict in ways that no one could have foreseen. When the thunder of battle faded, Aachen was left in a state of haunting silence. The echoes of war had ceased, leaving behind a city that seemed frozen in time. The city's ancient streets, once alive with movement, were now choked with mounds of shattered masonry and twisted steel. Each corner turned revealed a new tableau of destruction, a silent testament to the ferocity of the conflict. Roofless buildings stood like hollow sentinels, their broken windows staring blankly over a landscape of debris. These structures, once homes and businesses, now resembled skeletal remains, their interiors exposed to the elements. Piles of bricks and splintered beams blocked thoroughfares, while tattered remnants of walls cast jagged shadows across the open wounds of craters. The streets, once bustling with life, were now impassable, a maze of destruction. Amid the devastation, countless dangers remained hidden. The very ground beneath one's feet was treacherous, with hazards lurking in every shadow. Unexploded ordnance, shells buried in the mud, grenades caught in the rubble, and mines nestled beneath fallen stone waited silently, their presence marked only by the occasional glint of metal or the odd unnatural shape amid the debris. These remnants of war were deadly, a constant threat to any who might venture into the ruins. These deadly remnants lurked beneath collapsed floors, and within the tangled remains of what had once been homes and shops, a constant threat to any who might return. The danger was omnipresent, a grim reminder of the recent past. The process of reclaiming Aachen began with the slow, methodical removal of hazards. Bomb disposal squads and engineers worked tirelessly, their efforts a crucial first step in the city's recovery. Rubble was carefully shifted, brick by brick, as engineers and machines worked to uncover and disarm the explosives that haunted the ruins. Each piece of debris moved was a step towards making the city safe once more. The city's skeleton was revealed in stages. Battered facades giving way to empty courtyards, shattered churches opening onto carpets of broken glass and stone. The once vibrant cityscape was now a ghostly echo of its former self. Nature, too, began its quiet work. Slowly, life started to reclaim the desolate landscape. Rain pooled in shell holes and bomb craters, turning some into temporary ponds. The water reflected the sky, a stark contrast to the devastation below. Weeds and wild grass pushed through cracks in the pavement, claiming spaces where feet no longer walked. These small signs of life were a testament to nature's resilience. Wind swept dust through the gutted streets, carrying with it the faint echoes of the destruction that had come before. The air was thick with the memories of conflict, a silent witness to the city's suffering. In this new silence, Aachen's ruins stood as both a monument to devastation and the first chapter in the city's slow rebirth, a landscape shaped by war, waiting in quiet patience for the day when life would return. The city, though scarred, held within it the promise of renewal, a testament to the enduring spirit of its people. With Aachen's guns silenced and its ruins mapped by engineers, Allied commanders faced a new, daunting challenge, transforming a battlefield into a functioning stronghold. The city's battered streets and gutted buildings were not only scars of conflict, they were obstacles and opportunities in the ongoing campaign. Military planners quickly recognized Aachen's strategic value as a logistical hub and staging area for the advance into Germany. The first steps in reconstruction were guided by necessity and precision. Combat engineers established secure corridors through the maze of debris, clearing vital roadways for the movement of troops, vehicles and supplies. Bulldozers and cranes replaced tanks in the city centre, shifting mountains of rubble to create passable routes. Within days, makeshift command posts sprang up in surviving cellars and reinforced bunkers. Field hospitals were set up in the least damaged structures, their windows patched with tarps and salvaged boards. Signal corps teams strung new lines of communication along shattered telephone poles, restoring vital links between frontline units and rear echelons. Supply convoys rumbled through the cleared avenues, bringing rations, ammunition and fuel. At the same time, military police established checkpoints to control access and maintain security in the unstable environment. Patrols swept the outskirts, searching for hidden threats and remnants of enemy resistance. Reconstruction efforts extended beyond immediate military needs. Teams worked to restore basic infrastructure, repairing water mains severed by shell fire, patching up sections of railway and setting up temporary power generators. The goal was clear: make Aachen not just a symbol of victory, but a functional asset for the Allied push deeper into the Reich. In the shadow of ruined cathedrals and toppled monuments, soldiers and engineers laboured side by side, transforming chaos into order. Each repaired road and fortified outpost marked a step towards stability, ensuring Aachen could serve as a vital springboard for the campaigns to come. As winter approached, the city's reconstruction became a race against time. Sandbagged positions, reinforced by concrete and steel, lined the new front, warehouses filled with supplies and artillery units repositioned to cover the approaches eastward. Aachen, once a fortress of resistance, was now an anchor for the Allied advance, a testament to strategic adaptation amid the ruins of war. While the guns thundered and infantry pressed through Aachen's shattered streets, another battle raged behind the front lines. A battle of logistics. For the Allied advance to succeed, a continuous flow of supplies, fuel and ammunition had to reach the men fighting in the city's labyrinth of rubble. This was no simple task. Every street was choked with debris, every route threatened by sniper fire or sudden artillery barrages. Military convoys became the arteries of the campaign. Each day, long lines of trucks, jeeps and half-tracks snaked their way through muddy backroads and hastily cleared paths. Drivers worked in tight convoys, headlights blacked out at night to avoid detection. Engineers and pioneers led the way, repairing bridges with wooden planks and steel beams, laying down temporary matting over bomb-cratered roads. Combat supply dumps sprang up in bombed-out warehouses and ruined courtyards guarded by armed sentries. Here, quartermasters managed the distribution of everything from rifle cartridges to fresh rations, fuel drums to medical kits. Forklifts and handcarts replaced tractors and horses, as speed and efficiency became the difference between life and death. The pressure was relentless. Artillery shells sometimes landed within yards of unloading teams, forcing them to work quickly, sometimes in near darkness. Ammunition was prioritized. Crates of shells stacked high for the howitzers, pounding enemy strongpoints. Fuel trucks ran near constant shuttles to keep tanks and armored vehicles in motion. Communication was key. Radio operators perched in makeshift command posts relayed urgent requests for reinforcements, replacement parts, or emergency medical supplies. Signalmen strung wire through cellars and along fence posts, keeping the vital link between rear echelons and the forward edge of battle. When a supply line was cut by enemy action, small detachments were dispatched to repair or reroute the flow. Sappers cleared mines from railways, while bulldozers dug new bypasses around collapsed buildings. Even as shells fell, the lifelines held, the relentless effort of thousands, ensuring that the fighting men at Aachen never ran out of what they needed to hold the line. This invisible network, stretching back to depots in Belgium and France, was the true backbone of the Allied assault. Without it, the push through Aachen would have stalled in its tracks. With it, the city became not only a symbol of victory, but a living testament to the power of organization, ingenuity, and sheer determination under fire. In the shattered heart of Aachen, armored vehicles became both spearhead and shield for the advancing Allied troops. The city's narrow roads and dense neighborhoods, once designed for horse-drawn carts and quiet foot traffic, now echoed with the grinding tracks and roaring engines of Sherman tanks, Stuarts and self-propelled guns. Urban combat brought new challenges for these iron behemoths. Maneuvering was perilous. Turning a corner could mean blundering into a hidden Panzerfaust team or a German anti-tank gun waiting in ambush. Tank commanders peered through vision slits, wary of every shadowed doorway and pile of rubble. Infantry squads hugged the sides of the tanks, a living shield against enemy soldiers armed with magnetic mines and grenades. The American tanks became battering rams, blasting through barricades and collapsed walls to carve new paths. Their cannons shattered machine gun nests and fortified cellars, while coaxial machine guns swept upper windows where snipers waited. In turn, German defenders used every trick in the book: mines buried under cobblestones, Molotov cocktails dropped from rooftops, and concealed anti-tank guns firing point blank. Close coordination was vital. Radio chatter crackled between tank crews and infantry officers, relaying threats and targets in real time. Forward observers directed fire from tank destroyers, smashing strongpoints too tough for riflemen. Engineers followed in the wake of armor, clearing debris and disarming booby traps to keep the columns rolling. Losses were heavy. In Aachen's labyrinth, a single immobilized tank could block an entire advance, forcing desperate recovery missions under fire. Crews worked tirelessly to repair damaged tracks, swap out blown road wheels, and patch up armor with scavenged steel plates. Yet despite the dangers, armored vehicles proved indispensable. Their mere presence forced German defenders to alter tactics, pulling back from exposed positions and vacating open intersections. When the city's defenders tried to counterattack, it was the thundering guns of Allied tanks that broke the assaults, shattering formations before they could gain ground. In the end, the battle for Aachen was a grim testament to the evolution of urban warfare. The iron giants of the Allied armies, scarred by shrapnel, blackened by fire, became symbols of relentless momentum. Their success was not just in their firepower, but in their ability to adapt, to support the infantry, and to turn the city's stone and steel into the very tools of victory. Beneath the thunder of artillery and the rattle of small arms, a quieter, relentless struggle played out, one waged by the combat engineers of both armies. In the siege of Aachen, every block of rubble, every cratered street, and every barricaded building became a puzzle of survival and strategy. For the American forces, moving heavy equipment and supplies through a city reduced to chaos demanded ingenuity and grit. Engineers worked around the clock to clear the labyrinth of debris that choked the avenues. Bulldozers, hastily armored with steel plates, pushed aside rubble while under fire. Sappers braved booby traps and mines, some hidden beneath the cobblestones, others wired to the corpses of fallen vehicles to carve safe passage for advancing columns. Each intersection became a battlefield in miniature as engineers used explosives to breach walls or demolish obstacles set by retreating defenders. Bridges, vital arteries for tanks and trucks, were frequent targets for German demolition teams. The Americans responded with speed and improvisation, laying temporary Bailey bridges across shattered spans, often under the threat of sniper fire or lurking enemy patrols. In the ruins, water and electricity were gone. Engineers rigged makeshift pipelines and power sources to keep the siege moving. Meanwhile, the German defenders turned the city into a fortress engineered for attrition. They mined likely approach routes, seeded cellars and sewer entrances with tripwires, and built barricades from overturned trams and sandbags. Whole buildings were wired for demolition, ready to collapse onto advancing troops or block key roads at a moment's notice. In the tunnels below, German pioneers set up command posts and supply dumps, using Aachen's ancient underground to move unseen between positions. Both sides faced relentless challenges from the environment itself. Rain turned craters into muddy traps, hampering the movement of men and machines alike. Rubble-strewn streets forced engineers to improvise, using whatever materials they could find, timbers from ruined houses, steel beams from collapsed factories, to shore up defensive positions or build new cover. Communication cables had to be laid and relayed as bombardment severed lines. Field radios, the lifeline for coordination, were shielded in hastily dug bunkers and reinforced cellars. At every turn, engineers raced against time, repairing, rebuilding, and sometimes destroying, all while under the constant threat of enemy fire. In Aachen, victory hinged not only on the courage of those who charged forward, but on the unseen hands that built the way ahead or tore it down behind them. The siege was as much a test of technical skill and endurance as it was of arms, a contest where every brick and beam could tip the scales of battle. While engineers fought to clear the way and fortify positions, another silent struggle unfolded behind the front lines. One of information, deception, and relentless pursuit of an advantage. In the battle for Aachen, communication and intelligence became the invisible threads binding the chaos of urban warfare. For the American forces, maintaining command and control was a daily ordeal. Field radios, lifelines between squads, platoons, and higher command crackled with coded messages, their signals sometimes muffled by the labyrinth of stone and steel. Radio operators, crouched in shattered basements or behind armoured vehicles, risked sniper fire and shell bursts to keep lines open. When radios failed, runners dashed through shellfire with written orders, weaving through rubble-strewn streets to relay vital information. Wire teams, armed with reels of cable and spools of hope, crawled through the ruins to lay and repair telephone lines. Each length of wire was a gamble. Exposed cables were easy targets for German artillery, and lines cut by bombardment or sabotage could isolate entire companies. Night and day, these teams worked under constant threat, splicing and rerouting communications to hold the fabric of the assault together. Intelligence units, meanwhile, sifted through the chaos for every scrap of useful information. Interrogation of captured German soldiers, analysis of abandoned documents, and study of enemy radio traffic provided precious insight into defensive plans and troop movements. Signal Corps specialists hunched over listening devices, intercepting German transmissions and searching for patterns, clues buried in static that could reveal a shift in enemy tactics or an imminent counterattack. Deception played its part as well. The Americans set up fake radio traffic to suggest attacks where none were planned, hoping to draw German reserves away from their true objectives. Meanwhile, German defenders, aided by local knowledge and concealed observation posts, used their own networks to coordinate ambushes and reinforce crumbling lines. They exploited the city's maze of tunnels and ruined buildings to move scouts and messengers unseen, keeping their commanders informed even as the front shifted hour by hour. Both sides relied on coded messages and ciphers, knowing that a single intercepted transmission could mean disaster. Cryptographers far from the front raced to break enemy codes, while field officers used secure phrases and daily changing keys to protect their plans. The struggle for information was as fierce as any firefight. In Aachen, every order relayed, every intercepted signal, every whispered report could be the difference between catastrophe and survival. The battle was shaped not only by bullets and bombs, but by the relentless flow and protection of communication in the fog of war. In the shattered streets of Aachen, the scars of battle ran deeper than the bullet-pocked walls or the craters gouged into the earth. For the men who fought here, the siege was not only a test of tactics and endurance, but a relentless assault on the mind, a crucible that would leave invisible wounds long after the guns fell silent. Every day brought a new gauntlet of fear and exhaustion. The thunder of artillery and the staccato clatter of machine guns became a constant, inescapable soundtrack, echoing through ruined corridors and into the dreams of those who survived. Sleep, when it came, was shallow and haunted, broken by the distant rumble of explosions or the sudden jarring silence that signaled danger just as surely as any alarm. For many, the city itself seemed to conspire against them. The labyrinth of rubble and darkness bred a special kind of anxiety, as every corner might conceal a sniper, every basement a booby-trap. Soldiers advanced with their nerves stretched taut, eyes flicking from shadow to shadow, hands tightening on their weapons as they braced for the unseen. The fear was primal, immediate, an enemy as real and relentless as the Germans themselves. The pressure of leadership weighed heavily on officers, who bore the burden of decisions that could mean life or death for their men. They steeled themselves to give orders that sent friends into harm's way, their faces stoic even as doubt gnawed at them from within. For the rank and file, the loss of comrades was a daily agony, each empty foxhole or silent place in the chow line a stark reminder of the battle's cost. Camaraderie offered some shelter. In fleeting moments between the chaos, men shared cigarettes and stories, laughter and silence. These bonds, forged in fire, were lifelines, helping them endure, if only for another hour, another day. Yet even these connections could not always stave off the creeping sense of isolation. In the ruins of Aachen, the world narrowed to a handful of faces, a few battered streets, the next objective. Some men found themselves changed in ways they could not articulate. Hands shook without reason, tempers frayed over trivial matters. The memory of sudden violence, an ambush in a cellar, the collapse of a building under shell fire, replayed endlessly behind their eyes. For others, numbness set in, a hollowing out, as if feeling itself had become a luxury they could no longer afford. The psychological toll of Aachen was not a story told in medals or after-action reports, but in the quiet moments, a 1,000-yard stare, a trembling hand, a voice cracking in the dark. It was the burden carried home, the haunting that lingered long after victory was declared. In the end, the battle for Aachen was fought not just with rifles and bayonets, but in the minds and memories of those who survived. Echoes of war that no armistice could silence. As the battle for Aachen raged, it was the relentless drumbeat of artillery that shaped the city's fate as much as any infantry assault. Day and night the thunder of howitzers, mortars and field guns reverberated through the ancient streets, their shells tearing apart centuries of history in seconds. For both the American attackers and the German defenders, artillery was more than a weapon. It was a force of nature, raining destruction with indiscriminate fury. The Americans, determined to break the city's stubborn resistance, brought up batteries of 155 mm and 105 mm guns, laying down barrages that pulverized defensive positions and collapsed entire blocks. Each salvo sent fountains of brick, glass and timber into the air, transforming once familiar neighborhoods into alien landscapes of jagged ruin. The Germans, for their part, replied with their own guns, targeting advancing columns and suspected points of assembly, seeking to stall the inexorable tide. Inside the city, the effects were immediate and inescapable. Streets were cratered and impassable, choked with debris and shattered vehicles. Buildings that had stood for generations were reduced to skeletal shells, their interiors gutted by fire and blast. Landmarks, churches, schools, municipal halls became piles of broken stone, their significance lost beneath the weight of rubble. The very layout of Aachen was altered, landmarks unrecognizable, city maps rendered obsolete by the scale of devastation. For the soldiers fighting among the ruins, artillery was a constant, unpredictable terror. A whistling descent and a split-second's warning, the difference between life and death measured in mere feet. Men learned to move quickly from cover, to hug the earth at the first hint of incoming rounds, to dread the telltale silence before the next barrage. The noise was deafening, a physical force that rattled bones and unsettled the mind. In cellars and makeshift shelters, men huddled, counting the seconds between explosions, praying for the barrage to lift. Artillery did more than destroy. It reshaped the very nature of combat. Streets became killing zones, open spaces, death traps. Communication lines were severed, supply routes blocked, casualties mounting not just from bullets but from collapsing walls and flying debris. The defenders, once confident in their fortified positions, found their strong points systematically reduced to dust. The attackers, forced to advance through chaos, paid dearly for every yard gained. Yet amid this devastation the battle pressed on. Artillery had turned Aachen into a city of ruins, but also into a crucible where resolve was tested and forged. By the time the guns finally fell silent, little remained untouched by their wrath. The anvil of fire had left its mark, on stone, on steel, and on the men who fought beneath its thunder. When the last guns fell silent over Aachen, the city lay shattered, a monument to both the fury of modern warfare and the resilience of those who endured it. Yet the battle's echoes stretched far beyond the city's ruined walls, shaping the trajectory of post-war Europe in ways both immediate and profound. In the aftermath, the Allies surveyed not just a tactical victory, but a symbol. Aachen was the first German city to fall, a breach in the myth of Nazi invincibility. Its capture signalled to both friend and foe that the fortress cities of the Reich could be taken, no matter their defences or the cost. For American commanders, the lessons learned amid Aachen's rubble about urban combat, coordination, and the price of attrition would shape strategies for the bloody months ahead, from the Hürtgen forest to the crossing of the Rhine. The city itself became a crossroads for the shifting tides of occupation. With its infrastructure in ruins, Allied engineers and military police worked tirelessly to restore order, clear the streets, and rebuild essential services. German prisoners, once defenders of the city, now laboured under Allied supervision, piecing together what remained of homes and roads. The scars of battle were everywhere: shell-pocked facades, gutted churches, and the silent emptiness where entire neighbourhoods had stood. For the soldiers who survived, Aachen left an indelible mark. Veterans spoke of the city with a mixture of pride and sorrow, recalling comrades lost amid the stone and smoke. The psychological toll lingered, manifesting in quiet moments and haunted dreams, as men struggled to reconcile the necessity of destruction with the cost paid in human suffering. But Aachen's legacy extended beyond personal memory. In the years after the war, it stood as a cautionary tale, a warning of what total war could unleash upon the very heart of Europe. The shattered city was visited by diplomats, generals and journalists, each seeking lessons in its ruins. Its reconstruction became a symbol of hope and renewal, a testament to the possibility of healing even the deepest wounds. Across post-war Europe, the battle for Aachen was studied in military academies and debated in parliament halls. It influenced the fortification of Cold War frontiers and the doctrines of urban warfare for generations. The city's fate underscored the fragile line between civilization and chaos, reminding all who pass through its streets that peace, once broken, is never easily restored. Aachen's legacy was not just in the stones rebuilt or the streets cleared, but in the shadows it cast forward, shadows that shaped the continent's recovery, its memory, and its resolve to never again let war consume its city.